Hello everyone, so today we are going to talk about kanji and more specifically, remembering the kanji. Remembering the kanji, or RTK for short, is a method that I've used to learn 2,200 kanji. Usually when people talk about RTK, they use the word learn quite carefully because RTK is actually only the first step to mastering the kanji. Indeed, once you've used RTK to learn the 2,200 kanji, you'll only be able to recognize the general meaning of the kanji, but you won't actually be able to read them. It sounds like a strange method, but actually it's a way of breaking down learning the kanji. So first you learn how to recognize the general meaning of the kanji, and then with another method you learn how to read them. In this video, I will not go into detail about how RTK works, but I will be putting some links in the description box below if you want to find out more about what it is exactly. It might be useful so you know what I'm talking about in this video. Anyway, so as it says in the title of the video, the point of this video is to give you advice and sort of tips and tricks to make sure that your journey with RTK goes as smoothly as possible. So the first thing I would say is to use the guide by Nihongo Shark. That's the guide that I used and that I will put in the description box below. It's especially good if, like me when I started, you didn't know anything about Anki or RTK, and it helps you to set up everything, just show you the little tweaks you have to make the most of the deck that you will use to learn the kanji. The article in itself is quite long and detailed, but I think it's really well made, very well structured, and it will give you a good understanding of how the method works. Number 2, if you use the deck from Nihongo Shark's guide, you will have the stories included in the deck already. In my experience, 90% of the stories already included in the deck worked super well for me. However, when the story included didn't work, I had to use a website which is called Koohii. I will put that in the description box below. And on the website, the members can share their own stories that they came up with for the kanji. And I found that very useful because it meant that I didn't have to spend time trying to come up with my own stories. So it's definitely a time saver. Whoops, lighting problems. Sorry for that. Let's carry on. But whatever stories you use for the kanji, what's important is that all the stories resonate with you. For example, some of the primitives, so the small parts of the kanji, were references to the world of Lord of the Rings. And because I never really got into Lord of the Rings, I haven't watched all the movies, I know some people are shocked, then the stories didn't really resonate with me and it just made it hard for me to remember. However, the primitive for Spider-Man worked very well for me because I'm quite familiar with the universe and it's a character I can sort of relate to in a way. So if you're in that situation where a primitive doesn't really resonate with you at all, then you can either create a new name for it or just go on Koohii, because in the comments people often give advice on how to call the primitives to, make sure it's easier to remember. Number 3, at the beginning I would not recommend to do more than 20 new kanji a day. If you do less, that's fine, but I definitely don't recommend to do more than that, especially if you're not familiar at all with the kanji. If you sort of know kanji a little bit because you've used other methods before, then that can be okay. But if you're completely new to kanji like I was, I don't think it's a good idea to go above 20 a day, and that's already quite a lot. The main reason for that is obviously because it will be harder to remember too many kanji at a time, but also because if you don't remember the kanji, then you have to fail them, and then that means that the next day you have more reviews, and the more reviews you have, the more overwhelming it sort of gets, especially at the beginning. You really don't want to overdo it right from the beginning, and trust me, by the end of the deck you will have a lot of reviews to do, so don't be in a rush. Number 4 is to not hesitate to take some breaks from learning new kanji if you feel like you have too much or you're struggling to remember some of them already. Taking breaks, I think, is a nice opportunity for you to take the time to review the kanji without having the, extra task of learning new kanji on top of that. However, I would not recommend to take long breaks. What you can do, for example, is to just use the weekend to just review the kanji and focus on that, or even every other weekend, for example. But I would avoid really to take long breaks because the point of the challenge or RTK is to not really take ages, I think, to complete the 2,200 kanji, because while you're doing kanji, or at least that was my case, you're not really focusing on actually learning Japanese, so that can slow you down. So really I would recommend to do it as quickly as possible, but don't rush it either. Use a reasonable pace. Number 5 is to not assume that going through the 2200 kanji is the end of the journey, because it really isn't. I'm not even saying that to discourage you, but I've seen a lot of accounts of people online which said that they went through the 2200 kanji, then they stopped, and then they realized a month later that they forgot everything. So what happens after you've done your 2200 kanji is that you just keep reviewing every day, every single day, always, 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 to make sure that the kanji stick to your memory. Number 6 is to be aware that at the beginning, usually it should be quite simple to learn the kanji. Probably you will remember them quite easily, you will be able to recognize them instantly, but in my experience, once I've reached 1000 kanji, it started to get more difficult. For example, I would forget kanji that I used to know very well. I would mix up some of the kanjis, the new ones with the previous ones, and all that kind of stuff. But you have to remember that there's nothing wrong with you. The thing is, you're trying to cram a lot of information in your brain, and it's normal that sometimes your brain will forget some information because it's trying to make room for so many kanji in a short amount of time. So I would not be surprised if you do struggle remembering the kanji. The only remedy for this is to review, and in time everything will come to place. Number 7, sometimes it's not the kanji you mix up, but the stories. So if it happens, if you start mixing up a story of one kanji with another one, just change it. It can be quite frustrating to have to change the story because you're used to it or you liked it or whatever. But sometimes you have to make little changes to make sure that your retention is at its best. Number 8 is to not be too weirded out if some of the keywords for the kanji are very weird words. In my experience, a lot of the words were either very, very rare in English, or they were just literary words that no one really used, or even native speakers didn't really know for sure what they were because sometimes I had to ask friends. For me, the challenge was that I'm not a native speaker, so I was more likely to not know certain words. So if that was the case, what I did was to put a slash and give another keyword so I can sort of clarify the meaning of the word in English that I didn't know, if that makes sense. Or I would just put a word in French or whatever your native language is, so it was a bit easier for me to remember. And number 9, and I'm struggling to come up with pleasant looking ways of counting with my fingers, is to never ever skip your reviews. You might think you don't have time, I just can't do it today, but never skip the reviews. If you don't want to learn new kanji, that's one thing, but never skip the reviews. The reason is actually very simple. At the beginning, it might sort of be okay to skip them, but towards the middle, and especially more so at the end, it's very important not to skip them because the reviews will just add up like crazy. They will really go up. I remember once I forgot to do my reviews and I had 300 reviews to do the next day. So that took me an hour to go through. So that's quite a lot. And I think one of the traps you can fall into if you don't do your reviews is that the next day you will be discouraged and then you won't do your reviews again. And then you might give up because the reviews are just way too overwhelming. I've heard lots of stories where people said they had like 1,000 reviews to do. And I was like, oh my God, this is like a horror story for anyone that does RTK. So definitely don't skip your reviews and everything should be okay for you, I hope. So that's it for today. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have gone through RTK, don't hesitate to give additional advice if I forgot anything. And if you're going through RTK and you have any problems, do let me know. Hopefully I can help you and give you some advice based on my experience. And I will see you next week, hopefully, and bye!